Have you ever wondered if N from Pokemon Black and White could become champion? Well, in this episode we'll see if he can actually beat Leon and become champion of Galar. Since we are playing as N, we need some rules. So first off, we need to catch Pokemon on the first try. We must release one Pokemon after every gym. Of course, we also can't trade or use any held items. But of course, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, it would really help me out. Now first off, we need to choose our character. That guy looks like the most like N, so we name him N. And then we get to meet Leon, the guy that we're actually going to beat. Of course, he has a very strong Charizard, and we resent him for that. He should not be keeping a Pokemon as his slave. Now once it was time to choose the starter, I was really disappointed since I don't feel any connection to them. So instead I chose this Purloin. Now of course, since I care so much about Pokemon, I had to go and save the Wooloo that ran into the forest. And there was a lot of fog, making it really difficult. But finally, after searching for a very long time, we found the Wooloo with the help of Leon, of course. Now after buying some clothes and then playing with my Purloin, it was finally time to catch my second Pokemon, which would be this Vanillite. And of course we had to catch him on the first try, which wasn't that much of a problem, since the Vanillite was really low level and it of course really wanted to join me on my journey. Then I found two Timples that actually really wanted to join me. As you can see, they wanted to be caught, and as you can see, we caught him on the first try. Yay! Now quick balls could be actually amazing for us. I bought a bunch of those, and then I chose my number, which would be 14. Then I bought a sports cap and found a Growlithe, which also would join my team after again being caught on the first try. Now as you can see, I wanted to get as many Pokemon as possible, so what I did was I also found a Woobat in the cave and decided to catch it, but unfortunately the Growlithe took it down, meaning that I had to try again with another Pokeball, but it was on half health, making it very unlikely to be caught. Of course it wasn't caught, so I ran away and tried to catch a new one. Now this time, because it had way less health, it was way easier to catch it, and finally it was caught. Now for the last Pokemon before the first gym, I decided to catch an Eevee, which again was caught on the first try. Now it's way easier to catch Pokemon on the first try here in the beginning, it gets way more difficult later. So I also bought a normal uniform, not realizing that I wouldn't be able to wear it. And then it was time for the battle, where my Vanillite, of course, was amazing for this, and Ice type against the Grass types, amazing. So we took out the Gossifleur. So next up was of course the Eldegoss, so I decided to Dynamax my Pokemon to be able to ease the battle a bit more. As my Pokemon was growing, I could sense the fear in the eye of the Grass-type gym leader, and finally after tanking Max Overgrowth, I was able to then do some damage. Now unfortunately for me, Max Hailstone was absolutely useless and did basically nothing. But then using Max Guard, I managed to stall one turn of Max Overgrowth, meaning I wouldn't take damage and the enemy would be able to un-Dynamax earlier. And then I tried to block it again, but unfortunately it failed, so Vanillite, took a lot of damage and actually fainted. Luckily for me, after my Vanillite died, I still had my Growlithe, which absolutely clutched up. Now it didn't one-shot the Eldegoss, but it survived an attack with only 5 HP. It was a critical hit, and then, look at this. The hail stops, meaning that I was able to get in one more attack to finally take out the Eldegoss. After that, we finally got the gym badge. So we shook his hand, and we got our first badge. Only 7 more to go. Of course, as said, we have to remove one Pokemon from our team, which would turn out to be Growlithe. Now that is really sad. He was the one that won us the badge, but you gotta do what you gotta do. So we remove him. And now we only have 5 Pokemon left, meaning we have to catch another Pokemon. But first, our Purloin decides to evolve into a Liepard, which is absolutely amazing. You'll see how much this will help us later. But I actually didn't catch any Pokemon before the battle against Nessa. That's how confident I was. So after beating the gym mission, it was time to defeat the second gym leader. Now Liepard managed to do a lot of damage to the Goldeen, and of course it managed to survive the horn attack. So after just a few more Swifts, it was finally done for the Goldeen. And then it was time for the Barraskewda, which used Aqua Jet, which again didn't do that much damage. Liepard was actually absolutely insane. So another Swift did a lot of damage, then another one. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to take down the Barraskewda, so it fainted after another Aqua Jet, but then using Air Cutter was all that was needed to bring her down to her last Pokemon, her Dreadnought, which is absolutely insane. One-shot the Woobat. And then it was time for the Tympole, which actually could do something. It survived the hit, and then I Dynamaxed it and decided to use a ground type attack, which did way less than I thought it would do. So, you know, even though I did a lot of damage, finally I had to use my EV, which then died, meaning that I only had one Pokemon left to try and beat this. So I used my Vanilluxe, and then decided to revive another one of my Pokemon to be able to win, otherwise I would have no chance. So Vanillite took the hit, and I decided to fully heal my Tympole, which I did. Now thankfully, due to sand attacks from the Eevee, Dreadnought missed, and then it was time for Bubble Beam with Tympole, which would do enough damage to take out the Dreadnought, meaning that finally we beat Nessa and get our second gym badge. Let's go. Now, being the absolute master trainers that we are, we had a meeting with the chairman of the league afterwards, Rose, and then we decided to catch a Shellos because, of course, N also had that Pokemon. So we use a net ball to be able to catch it to increase our chances, and it works. We actually do get a Shellos. But then we also have to remove one Pokemon. I forgot to do that before I caught the Shellos, so you know I have to do it now. So I didn't include the Shellos here because we should have done this before. So the one we had to remove was Woobat, which is, you know, fine. But then Tympole started to evolve, and you know that's really good because he'll have way higher stats, and that would really help us out against Kabu. But then also Eevee started evolving, but I didn't want that to happen because, you know, Eevee shouldn't be evolving now, and we need a specific Pokemon, which would be Leafeon, a Pokemon that N actually has used. We can't be using Pokemon that N hasn't used. So after staying in the Bidoof Inn, I decided to catch a Vulpix in Kabu's gym, of course, and then I had to battle Kabu himself. And this battle will actually be really interesting. So first we use Water type attack, of course, to take out the Ninetales, which works. That's nice. And then it was time for Arcanine, which also did some damage, but not a lot, meaning we could use Bubble Beam again. Now, with one more hit of Bubble Beam, that was enough to take out the Arcanine. Now all that remained was this Dynamaxed Centiskorch, which it didn't do any damage to. So it was time for him to use Max Flutterby. Of course, yeah, that did a lot of damage. Palpitoad was gone. But then I brought out Shellos, which of course also has, you know, around the same type moves. But of course here it does a lot of damage as well. Max Flutterby is an absolutely insane move. But then, of course, I use Rockfall to do a lot of damage, I thought, but it did nothing. So I decided to protect myself for one turn to make the Centiskorch, you know, weaker, and then bring out my Liepard, which surely could do something, and it did. So finally we got the third gym badge and defeated Kabu. Number 3, now we go for number 4. But first, of course, you have to spin the wheel again and decide which Pokemon that we have to remove. And it turned out to be Vanillite, meaning that we had to release Vanillite, and that we did. Now in a raid I was actually able to catch a Ferrothorn, and then afterwards my Vulpix decided to evolve, and it turned into a Ninetales. And then my Shellos finally started evolving into a Gastrodon. Now in the next battle I'll be up against none other than the Emo Kid. So first his Yamask gets absolutely destroyed by my Leafeon, Then I use Iron Head against the Mimikyu to be able to take down its disguise, and then try to use it again. But Mimikyu uses Shadow Sneak to do some damage, but a bit less than half, even though it was a critical hit. So my Iron Barbs do a bit of damage, and then an Iron Head was just enough to be able to do a bit of damage, but one more could finally take it down. Now Light Part uses Assurance to do a lot of damage, of course, a one-shot, and then by Dynamaxing, I could one-shot his Gengar, making this one of the easier gym battles that I had to do during the playthrough as N. And therefore we also get the next badge, and now we've done half. Only 4 more gym badges to go. And even the Palpitoad started to evolve and finally turned into a Seismitoad, which was amazing. This Pokemon was so good through the entire playthrough. But finally I actually had to remove the Ferrothorn. Unfortunately the wheel made me do that. I forgot to record, but yeah. But then I caught an Unpheasant, which, you know, tried to catch an Unpheasant, didn't really work. And then I tried again. Once again, it didn't work. This was really difficult. I even tried to catch its pre-evolution, maybe it would be caught. Still, it didn't work. But then, finally, I managed to catch an Unpheasant, which was gonna be used in the next battle against the Fairy-type gym leader. Now Seismitoad was absolutely insane, taking out the Weezing in 2 hits, and then of course taking out the Mawile in 1 hit with his ground-type moves. Then doing tons of damage on the Togekiss, even getting in a burn using Scald, and 1 more hit was enough to, with a critical hit, take the Togekiss out. It even survived a hit from the Alcremie, the Dynamaxed one at that, so it managed to actually attack twice, not only once, therefore getting in yet another Scald to bring it down to less than half health, meaning that a Dynamax Ninetales could finally take the Alcremie out. And therefore we won our 6th gym battle against the Fairy-type gym leader and got the 6th badge. Only 2 more to go before we were finally able to join the league. Let's go. First off, of course, we had to remove 1 more Pokemon, and it actually turned out to be Unpheasant, the Pokemon that we didn't even use once during the entire battle. I used Unpheasant a total of 0 times, but finally it got released. I also bought 30 Ultra Balls, which would be really useful when catching more Pokemon. Of course, here we have this Boldor that I managed to catch on after quite a few tries of different Boldors. I had to run away. And I also got myself a pair of shoes and also new clothes to look a bit more like N. Now it was time for the 6th gym battle. It was against Melanie here. So Boulder survives with Sturdy and then uses Rock Blast, a move that hits several times, to take out the Frostmoth very easily. And then it was time for the Darmanitan, which misses with Icicle Crash. Boulder is absolutely insane. And then he of course uses Rock Blast again to, in 3 hits, take out Darmanitan. Absolutely insane. But finally we had to switch out to Ninetales to take down the Ice Cube, which, you know, works out, only took 2 hits. But then comes the Lapras, very difficult battle. We had to switch out from the Leafeon, and finally, after tons of Max Knuckles and the undynamaxed Lapras, it's finally taken down after the Liepard manages to use a Grass type move on it. So we get the Ice Gym Badge, and now we only have to defeat 2 more gym leaders. First, however, we need to remove a Pokemon, which turned out to be Gastrodon, which made me really happy, since Gastrodon had the same typing as Seismitoad, but it was just worse. It was unnecessary in taking up slots. I actually didn't catch any Pokemon before the next battle though, meaning that Leafeon had to do some damage here, and then the Liepard could do some more. Then again I switched out to Ninetales. It was a pretty difficult battle in the start, but of course Malamar was way easier, one shot. Obstagoon also managed to do tons of damage to it. Took a bunch of hits, to be honest. It was difficult. It was really difficult. But it was only the Stunky left, and with ground type moves it was pretty easy to just 2-shot it. So we get our 7th gym badge, and now we only have to defeat Rayhan. First we have to remove our Ninetales, of course. I spun a wheel, forgot to record. And then we catch a bunch of Pokemon to help us out. The Bisharp didn't really work, unfortunately, so I had to go for a Clink and then try to evolve it. And it worked out. I actually did manage to catch the Clink, and finally, of course, I did level it up enough to be able to evolve it. Now it's time for the double battle against Ray Honda, which would be really interesting. That would be the first real competitive double battle we would have. But of course, my Pokemon were amazing for this. The Gigalith did take a bunch of damage, and the Flygon died pretty quickly after a bunch of ice attacks. Even the Sandaconda again was weak to grass type moves and also ice type moves, which was just amazing. Of course, there was a Duraludon that I had to take out, which did a bunch of damage to my Pokemon, but finally, after, hitting the Piloswine, it was finally taken out. But so was a Sandaconda, meaning that my Seismitoad using ground type moves could absolutely demolish Duraludon and give us our place in the battle against the other trainers that managed to get 8 gym badges. But first, we have to remove one Pokemon for one last time, and it was a Klinklang. Now, after releasing it and then deciding to level up my Pokemon a bit, of course I got the Gigalith from the Baldur, and then finally evolved the Piloswine into a Mamoswine. Then I decided to use a Level Ball, of course, to catch a Growlithe on one of the early routes, and that would actually finish up our team. So by catching a Growlithe and then leveling up a bunch with tons of candies, I managed to get tons of new moves, but also evolve it into a Arcanine. And now this was our final team. Amazing. So we decided to start our first battle. We just had to come through and beat Marnie first. Of course, that was really easy. Our Pokemon were higher level. I thought they needed to be a bit higher. I didn't really know what level Marnie's Pokemon were. I didn't search it up, but I expected them to be a bit higher in level. So this battle was really easy. Just a bunch of different attacks was enough. She had her last Pokemon almost one shot there. Then of course it was the second battle against Hop, where I did tons of damage with fighting type moves against both the Dabool and the Snorlax, meaning that Hop lost very important Pokemon there, and even his Corviknight got one shot by my Arcanine. This was a very, very easy battle, I must say. Even his Rillaboom got absolutely destroyed in 2 hits by my Arcanine. Then came the finals, where we were able to, of course, first defeat Bede, that for some reason decided to crash the entire thing, but of course that's fine, we take him out. And then it was time to battle Nessa, again one shot by a non-Dynamaxed Pokemon using Earthquake. Insane. Absolutely insane from Pokemon, but of course we were a bit over leveled here. Then the Gengar also gets one shot by our Liepard, meaning that finally we were in the final against champion Leon after defeating the Duraludon. So we were getting ready to battle Leon, we were ready to become champion, but all of a sudden we see something on the big television screen. Someone, aka Rose, is trying to destroy the Galar region, and we, as a 10-year-old, have to fix this. And as you can see, it's some serious stuff. I mean, there's lasers shooting out of the center of the arena. So we have to run out and fix that, because apparently we have to do everything in this world. But then finally came the battle against champion Leon. And this would be an insane and very, very fun battle, I must say. Of course, Leon being the champion he is, he gets a very long time to Aura farm, doing very unnecessary moves to pump himself up. But, finally he sends out his first Pokemon that we, in fact, don't one-shot, but we do a lot of damage to. So he manages to hit us with one attack that does more than half damage, but finally we take out his Aegislash. Now, we use a Mamoswine against the Haxorus, which does a lot of damage, but we can't take it out in 2 moves because we still have priority on one of our ice moves, which is just amazing. Now, since I didn't one-shot, Mamoswine did faint, but a Play Rough from the Liepard was enough to take out the Dragapult. And then, of course, the Arcanine could do tons of damage on Mr. Rhyme, even though it did faint, but then I just took out Liepard again to, hit it quickly and do some damage. Then a Grass-type move against Inteleon was enough to take it out, and then it only had its Charizard left. And I did manage to do some damage before Liepard unfortunately took a lot of damage, so I did a bit more, and then finally the Liepard died. So I Dynamaxed Gigalith and did some damage, and of course took out the Charizard, making us the champion As you can see, we're very happy, and Leon is also pretty happy. Of course, still aura farming, but you know, that's probably just who he is. And there, look, it's our mom, or N's mom. And then, of course, Leon holds a speech and, you know, formalizes our win, and we actually become champion. So there you have it. N can become champion even when he sticks to his core values. As you can see, after the battle, there's no point of keeping these Pokemon except of course the Eternatus, so one by one we're releasing them. Goodbye Leafeon, and goodbye Mamoswine, goodbye to all of you, and goodbye Arcanine. Finally, all Pokemon are gone, and yeah, that's it. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It would really help me out. And goodbye.